What if the Earth suddenly turned into a cube? Imagine you wake up one morning, rub your eyes, and look outside to see the horizon has corners. Sharp ones. Because overnight, somehow, the Earth is transformed from a mostly round, blue and green ball into a perfect six-sided die, a cube. The moon's still up there, shocked into silence. The stars are still twinkling, pretending nothing has happened. But gravity has questions. Let's start with the obvious. Earth is round because gravity likes things neat. Mass pulls itself inward toward a central point, and if you have enough of it, say, an entire planet's worth, the most stable, energy-efficient shape is a sphere. But a cube? That's unnatural. Gravity didn't sign up for this. So if the Earth were suddenly cubified, not slowly reshaped by forces over millennia, but instantly, like some cosmic prank, what would happen? First, gravity wouldn't get the memo right away. It would keep pulling things toward the center of mass, which, cube or sphere, is still smack in the middle of the planet. But now that the surface is a cube, the geometry gets weird. If you're standing at the center of one of the cube's six faces, gravity still pulls mostly down, perpendicular to the ground, as you're used to. Everything feels fine. But move toward one of the edges, and gravity starts acting sideways. Like, literally sideways. On a cube, the corners are farthest from the planet's center, and gravity still pulls toward that center, meaning your down direction starts tilting away beneath your feet. Walk too far toward a corner, and you'll feel like you're climbing a hill that gets steeper and steeper, except you're not climbing anything. It's the floor that's betraying you. Eventually, walking toward a corner would be like trying to walk up a 45-degree slope, then 60, then 89.9. At some point, you just slide back down. And the corners? Forget it. They're essentially cliffs. Gravity just doesn't work normally there. So if you were unfortunate enough to wake up near one, you might find yourself being gently, but firmly pulled sideways, or even diagonally, across the landscape, like a very confused ice cube sliding toward the middle of a table. And that's just solid ground. Water. Oh boy, oceans don't do cubes. Water also follows gravity, and it desperately wants to pool in the lowest possible place, on a cube-shaped Earth. That's the center of each face, so the oceans would slide, pour, and cascade down the cube's faces like someone trying to pour soup into a shallow plate with upturned edges. Most of the water would rush toward the center of each face, leaving the edges and corners bone dry. You'd end up with six massive oceanic puddles, one on each face of the cube, surrounded by rising cliffs of land. Picture the Pacific as a giant puddle in the middle of one side of a Rubik's Cube. But it gets worse. Earth's rotation, the reason we have days and nights, was built around a round shape. A spinning sphere distributes angular momentum smoothly. A cube, not so much. The rotational forces would create massive strain at the edges and corners, especially if the cube retains the same 24-hour spin cycle. The corners of the Earth, now hurtling through space at over 1,600 kilometers per hour at the equator, would become points of incredible mechanical stress, like the tip of a helicopter blade made of stone, which means, minor detail, the cube might not even survive for long. Those corners could start to crumble under centrifugal stress, gravitational imbalances, and plate tectonics freaking out. Earthquakes would be immediate and global. Mountains would try to shift. Crustal plates, no longer fitting together nicely, would buckle, snap, and slide like tectonic bumper cars. Entire continents could realign. Tsunamis would spill from the collapsing faces into the ocean basins below. The ring of fire would just be fire. Atmosphere? Also a problem. On a sphere, the atmosphere is nicely wrapped around the planet, evenly distributed. On a cube, the atmosphere would get pulled toward the center of each face, just like water, creating pressure pockets. The air would be thicker near the middle of each face and thinner at the corners and edges. Standing near the edge might feel like you're climbing Everest without leaving sea level. Weather systems would change dramatically. Hurricanes, which rely on the Coriolis effect and smooth spherical flow, might now turn into chaotic pinwheels, bouncing off cube edges and intensifying unpredictably. Thunderstorms could cluster in gravitational pits, jet streams. Good luck predicting those. Oh, and the poles. Remember them? On spherical Earth, they're neatly located at the top and bottom. But on a cube, there's no obvious top. If Earth kept its axis of rotation, the poles might now sit at the center of two opposite faces. But depending on how the cube is oriented, those poles could actually land on edges or corners, which would completely destroy our climate zones. The equator, the warm tropical belt, might shrink to a ring around the middle of one face or bend awkwardly along edges. Seasons, which depend on the tilt of Earth's axis relative to the sun, would turn into climate anarchy. Some regions might roast in constant sunlight, others freeze in eternal shade, and the rest would swing between the two like a confused pendulum. But suppose, just suppose, humans somehow survived the initial apocalypse of shifting oceans, suffocating air zones, collapsing cities, and firequakes. What then? Well, agriculture would be the next victim. The soil at the edges would dry out. The water is all down in the gravitational pits. Crops would only grow in the wet, oxygen-rich centers of each face, which would soon become overcrowded oases surrounded by desert highlands. Transportation? Every road would slope downhill, and building railways would mean engineering miracles just to cross from one face to another. Not to mention, trying to launch a rocket into orbit would be a nightmare. The changing gravitational vectors would make stable flight paths chaotic. Satellites would need constant adjustments. GPS would get confused every time it tried to triangulate a location near an edge. Speaking of space, our moon, still orbiting obediently, might not know what to do. The cube Earth would still exert gravitational pull, but the mass distribution would be slightly different, potentially destabilizing the Earth-Moon gravitational lock. The moon's orbit might stretch or wobble. Tidal forces could grow erratic. Nighttime beach walks would become a gamble. But let's say, for the sake of optimism, that humanity adapted. We built dome cities in the gravitational centers, developed water elevators to lift oceans back uphill, and created new religions centered on the sacred corners. Eventually, we developed technologies to terraform the cube into something more habitable. And here's the twist, we tried to make it round again. Not physically, but in function. Artificial gravity platforms, atmosphere redistribution towers, solar mirror satellites to simulate day-night cycles. It would be the greatest engineering project in human history to make a cube act like a sphere. Or maybe we wouldn't survive at all. Maybe the Earth cube experiment ends in a few dramatic weeks of tectonic violence, atmospheric collapse, and oceans defying the laws of fluid dynamics. And in the end, the cube Earth drifts lifeless through space, its perfect corners slowly eroded by time, returning ever so gradually to the shape it was always meant to be, a sphere. Because gravity, like nature, always wins. And next time someone says the Earth is flat, just be glad they didn't say it's a cube.